What is up, guys? I've known about these affordable Chinese mini excavators for a couple of years, but ordering one directly from China, shipping, tariffs, port fees, and the constant fear of getting scammed kept me from going any further than watching YouTube videos and dreaming of all the projects I could tackle. When I started seeing more models pop up on Marketplace and what seemed to be legitimate dealerships selling brands such as Ripa and Haiyi, my optimism in obtaining one of these units was yet again revived. Originally, I had my eye set on a Ripa R10 Eco Gas model. I actually reached out to my local dealer and was quite impressed with the experience. Then a buddy mentioned someone he knew selling an SDLE20 with a Yanmar diesel engine, and that got me to wondering where all these machines were actually coming from. I had heard of auctions before, but always assumed that they were not open to the public, and some type of reseller permit was required to participate. When I spotted a Marketplace ad for an auction advertising an SDLE20, I clicked through, and sure enough, it led me to a legitimate-looking auction site located right here in my hometown. From there, I could see upcoming listings and past sales prices. That's when I realized people were buying these excavators at auction and flipping them on Marketplace for a solid profit. Long story short, I registered, bid, and ended up winning a brand new 2025 SDLE20 Mini Excavator the next week. If you want a video breaking down exactly how the auction process worked for me, comment auction below. I'll definitely be going back. Everything was smoother than expected, and there's plenty of other attachments and equipment I've got my eyes on. Once I won, I had 3 days to wire the money and a week to pick the machine up. I didn't get the absolute rock bottom price. In fact, I haven't seen anyone pay more than I have for this unit at auction. However, I wasn't sure when the next batch, or even if the next batch would be arriving, and the convenience of just being able to grab a machine in my hometown made it worth it. As long as this machine is able to hold itself together and handles a fraction of what I expect to do, I feel I still got an incredible value. For those new to this world, these excavators are built in China with very minimal quality control and shipped to the US to be sold as is with no warranty. They technically include all necessary components, but the fluids and assembly are questionable at best. People like me see value because we're willing to put in the work to get them dialed in for light-duty home projects. Anyway, now that I officially own this unit, this video is a full walk around and look inside. I'll show you everything I've done so far to make sure this doesn't turn into a literal paperweight and the biggest mistake I've made past 30. With only 2 hours on the machine, I can't give a long-term durability review yet, but I can give you a clear introduction to what to expect if you're considering one of these units. I'll go over build quality, measurements, component location, and the pre-operation maintenance I did to get it ready to work. I've already learned a lot, so I'll share recommendations that should help you get off to a better start than I did. If this video does well and shows good engagement, I plan to update you guys as I put more hours on the machine. So if you like the content, hit subscribe, thumb it up, and if there's something specific you want covered, leave it in the comments. I've watched a lot of these Chinese equipment videos, and I haven't seen anyone delve into the details like I have. Auction sites will describe this unit as a 2025 SDLanch SDLE20 Mini Hydraulic Excavator with a Yanmar 3 TNV 74F 23 horsepower diesel. Hydrostatic transmission, 17-inch dig bucket, hydraulic thumb, auxiliary hydraulics, 43-inch push blade, canopy, toolbox, and 7-inch rubber tracks. First of all, the model name is a little deceiving. SDLE20 makes it sound like a 2-ton machine, but it isn't. Google will call it a 1.4 ton based on the 1,200 kilogram batch. I haven't weighed mine yet, but Facebook groups consistently report real-world weights around 22 to 2,400 pounds, making it a 1.1 ton machine. The power specs are also misleading. Listings will say 23 horsepower at 3,000 RPM. And while the engine family might be capable of that, the badge on my machine listed it as an 11.2 kilowatt or about 15 horsepower at 2,400 RPM. For what these units are built to do though, 15 horsepower and the low end torque of a diesel should be plenty. The advertised dimensions are fairly accurate where it matters. The tracks and blade are just over 43 inches wide. Additionally, the blade is 9 inches tall. The tracks are 7 inches wide, 12 inches in height, and roughly 53 inches long. With the boom fully raised and the arm tucked in, the total length is just under 8 feet. But you should know it's not recommended to transport like this. With the boom tucked to the side, it's just over 7 feet. With the bucket down for transport, it measures about 11 feet. I measured the overhaul height at 86 inches. For reference, I'm 6 foot, 200 pounds, and I fit in the machine fine. Footroom is limited, unless you hover over the pedals. There just isn't much space to rest your feet. I plan to add 1 or 2 footrests sticking out in front of the cab later to keep from accidentally engaging the blade or thumb. One of the biggest positives for this machine over other models is the pilot controls. Before owning this machine, I didn't think much about them, but now I'd consider them essential. The pilot controls allow for the boom and bucket functions right at your side, so you're not leaning forward to operate anything. As for the body panels, they're fine. Compared to the Miva and H15R toaster oven look, these panels look much better. I think they copied this from the Kubota U17. The panels themselves aren't the issue. They could be thicker, sure, but they're acceptable. The problem is the mounting. Hidden bolts are difficult to reach, and exposed bolts often seem threaded into what seems to be just drilled, not tapped holes, causing even the grade 10.9 bolts to strip. It's annoying, but it should be a relatively easy fix. I'm looking forward to re-drilling and tapping the connections and implementing rivet bolts where necessary. Now, shifting from size and ergonomics to control quality, the machine has good bones. The pilot sticks are loose and floppy, which contributes to the machine's jerkiness, and yes, these machines are jerky, but I believe you can overcome the worst of it with experience. Many owners add spring mods to smooth the joystick response. That's a low-cost upgrade I plan to implement. I'm also looking into adding a cushion valve on the rotary motor. Let me know if that's something you guys would be interested in seeing. The hydraulic manifold is one of the few parts I haven't found a part number for yet, but it looks generic and works as intended. Where improvement is needed is the linkage between the foot pedals and levers to the valve body. There's excessive play I'd like to remove. It also would be great to make at least one of the foot pedals easier to remove because you have to pull at least one foot pedal to lift the floorboard and access the battery along with a lot of the other components. From the factory, the battery just sits loose, held only by the cables and the surrounding metal, with one sharp battery corner rubbing directly against the main hydraulic line. Originally, I was going to strap the battery in with this old ratchet strap, but thanks to Prime, I grabbed a $10 battery clamp and upgraded that immediately. With the panels off, you get a great look at all the interior components: the main valve body, pilot control pressure valve, rotating motor, engine and hydraulic radiators, the engine itself, the hydraulic pump, the hydraulic tank, and the diesel tank. One of the first tasks you'll want to do is add protection to any hydraulic hoses that might be rubbing on sharp edges. I added pieces of an old windshield washer bottle here to protect from the battery corner, and a leftover handlebar wrap there to stop the hoses rubbing against the radiator. I also used an old airline hose as a buffer material for sharp edges. Anything you do here won't hurt performance, and it might save you from digging through this mess of hydraulic lines to replace a $160 hydraulic hose that could have lasted years with a bit of preventative protection. The most important task by far is replacing the engine oil as soon as possible. Ideally, you'd do this before even driving it off the trailer at your house. Before changing the oil, I checked the dipstick, after finding it hidden behind a jumble of poorly placed wires and relays. I was at least relieved to see what could hardly pass as diesel oil registering on the dipstick. Thankfully, the SDLE20 has easy access to the oil drain, and there's plenty of room for a bucket to catch all 3 liters of the cheap, very thin oil these units are shipped with. People say it's soybean oil. I can't confirm it, but it's extremely thin, and if I had to guess, I'd say it was canola oil. I can't stress enough, changing the stock fluids is a non-negotiable. After draining and replacing the plug, it was time for the most aggravating task I've faced on this machine: removing the stock oil filter. It's hard to reach, hard to grip, and almost certainly installed dry. I tried different grips, angles, and hand positions, and finally broke it loose, locking large adjustable pliers around the filter and using a full foot of leverage. I replaced it with a Wix 51-365, but there's plenty of compatible options. For the next oil change, I'll probably use a Wix 51-356. It's an inch longer. Engine should be broken in using conventional oil. There's not much debate here. Synthetic oil is too slick for proper break-in, especially for rings. You want the higher friction of conventional oil to let the components settle in correctly. I use generic Tractor Supply 10W40, but if you're in warm climates, you might want to bump it to 15W40. I'll run this oil for about 20 hours before switching to synthetic. I dumped in a little over 3 quarts and called it good once I saw it hit the higher side of the dipstick. Additionally, I made the decision to grease the mating surface of the air filters. This unit implements a dual inner and outer air filter. I put a healthy pad of grease along each of the inner filter's mating surface to help protect against any dust sneaking through. Additionally, I did my due diligence to ensure all connections of the air lines were tight. They still ended looking a bit wonky, but I was content that no dusty air would be sneaking through. I'm really glad I went with the diesel engine. It's quieter, heavier, likely more reliable, low maintenance, and more powerful and more fuel efficient. But only time will tell, and you'll want to subscribe to find out. One thing to note here is this engine does have glow plugs. You just twist the key to the left for 20 to 30 seconds if you're struggling to start in cold weather. It also has an oil pressure switch located on the cab side of the engine, identified by a small bullet connector. It's not wired to a light from the factory, but I plan to wire in a buzzer powered from the key switch. What is wired from the factory is the temperature control sensor, displayed in Celsius. During normal operation, it should read about 90 C. If it goes above 100 C, start idling down or checking the forbidden port labeled "Never Open." You gotta love these Chinese warnings. I dared to look in mine and could visibly see coolant in there. I'm sure I'll get to replacing it eventually. To wrap up this discussion on the engine, it has a mechanical fan, and I currently have a rattle or tapping noise to track down. It could just be lifters settling in or the injection pump, but it's a bit unsettling, and I'm hoping to find a loose bolt somewhere on the chassis. The hydraulic pump on my unit is a PGP 510-83 GLP, a double gear pump with one low side pressure input and two high side pressure outlets. If I ever need to replace it, I should be able to upgrade to a PGP 510-88 3LP, which has two low pressure inlets and two high pressure outputs for about $350. I've heard this model of pump would provide more flow, but I can't verify that yet. That brings us to the hydraulic tank, our next early maintenance item. While not as critical as engine oil, you should replace the hydraulic fluid as soon as convenient. There's a drain port on the bottom of the tank. Replace it with ISO 46 hydraulic oil. It takes about 3 gallons. To get as much of the fluid out as possible, I fully retracted all cylinders before draining. I didn't think to drain the hydraulic cooler, but next time I plan to disconnect the hose and drain that as well. I filled the system with generic Tractor Supply ISO 46. I plan to add a low pressure hydraulic filter soon and will keep you updated. I haven't verified whether there's a filter in the tank or not. Let me know if you've peeked inside yours. In front of the hydraulic tank is the diesel tank. Many people report metal shavings inside and poor quality fuel. No surprise there. There's a fuel filter on the line, so I'm not worried yet. I plan to inspect the tank soon and possibly seal it with something like POR 15 depending on how the inside looks. I'll be replacing the screw-on filter and swap the fuel pump because the noise coming from the fuel pump isn't exactly confidence-inspiring. Before moving into the boom, hydraulic cylinders, pins, grease zerks, and bucket, I want to take a quick note on the drive motors. First thing to note, if you are unaware, is these motors are extremely slow. You won't be getting anywhere quick, but with the slow rotation, I've been impressed with their power. In my short time working this machine, I was able to push a good quantity of dirt. I believe the sacrifice in speed is made up for with power. Secondly, for longevity, drive motors should be case drained. I'm not going to bore anyone with the details yet, but it looks as though these motors have the ability for a case drain to be added, and my model surprisingly has an additional port on the swivel manifold, allowing me to run a case drain back to the main hydraulic tank. This would be quite the project, and I might need some motivation from you guys to complete the whole thing on camera. So if you're interested in that, please let me know in the comments. One more really important thing to note before moving into the front of the machine is the swivel motor gear bolt. I noticed mine was about a half a turn loose. Check your machine to make sure it's tightened. These gears see a lot of force, and it would be extremely dangerous for this bolt to fall out at the wrong time. I'll be returning to this bolt, clearing it of grease, and applying a hefty serving of Loctite. So finally, my initial impression on the business side of the machine. From a build quality perspective, it seems legit. The welds seem to be just about everywhere they could be laid, and the paint seems to be of good quality. There are some areas within the cavities that have been missed, but it's nothing I can't touch up myself. I'll keep you updated if I find a good paint match for this yellow and gray. It's a really good thing to have the main boom cylinder on the back of the boom and protected. A lot of these small excavators have the boom on the front and it's vulnerable to impacts and damage. One of my higher concerns regarding the digging arm is the gaps between some of the joints. A few of them are good and tight while others are lacking. I was able to find some 25mm bushings and I've ordered them from eBay. I think this is something that when addressed early should prolong the joints, and once it's been damaged will be very difficult to repair. The pins on this machine really let me down. From research online, I was under the impression they were all hardened steel pins, but the only hardened steel pins are really on the thumb, and they don't have grease zerks on the joints of the thumb, which is kind of a bummer. I plan to drill and tap some in to improve greasing. While the thumb has no grease zerks, some joints have two, with the option to grease via the pin zerk or the joint zerk. Others only have the joint zerk, so it's pretty random. The quality of the pin zerks is incredibly poor, almost impressively poor. I went to test the tightness of one, and with no pressure at all, it just sheared off. I have since replaced all of these with 10mm grease zerks. It humors me that we buy these machines from China, complain about their quality, and just order more parts from China to fix them. A common complaint is the low-profile grease zerks the machine is supplied with. I didn't have much of a problem with these, and more of a problem of them not all being the same. So I've gone through and replaced all of the low-profile cylinder grease zerks with M8 nipple-style grease zerks. I would caution you to grease your machine well before performing any work. No matter how excited you are to have it, you can cause damage very quickly. I saw a guy online who, with only a half an hour on his machine, had bent all these bolt retainers. My guess is his machine was not well lubricated, and the force of the cylinders rotating with the pins bent these retainer things out of shape. If it had been lubricated, the cylinder would have easily glided around the pin and not forced its rotation against the retaining ring. With the minimal quality control, a number of these joints come out of the factory with little to no grease in the joints. A couple of zerks to note are the two on the front right side of the chassis. The outboard zerk is for the ring gear, and the inboard zerk is for the bearing plate. You will want to add a few squeezes of grease to these zerks and then rotate your machine top about 30 to 40 degrees to grease another area of the ring gear and bearing plate. Continue this until you've rotated 360 degrees. Another zerk to note is for the swing boom, and it's hidden behind the hydraulic lines. Although it looks to be a standard fitting, mine had no nipple for the grease gun to clamp onto, allowing the joint to take grease. I've since switched it out to a 90-degree M10 zerk. A second zerk, also not to be missed, even if it was from the factory, is this swing boom hydraulic joint hidden below the chassis here. Well, that pretty well sums it up for this video. If you review your machine and perform what we've discussed, you'll be off to a far better start than most with their SDLE20 Chinese excavator. I'm going to close out with a few oddities I found on my machine, and I hope you make it back when I get a chance to review the tracks, roller bearings, and anything else you guys suggest in the comments. I'm a small channel, and I just might get lost in the algorithm if you don't subscribe for the next videos. If you found this helpful, please drop a comment below. It'll go a long way in encouraging me to keep bringing my camera along as I upgrade my machine and bring you guys content, information, and experiences with my new excavator. So just to close out, this little green wire wasn't seated into its clip. When I was down here fighting the oil filter, it dropped out in the dark, and I'll inform you, your machine will not start if it's not plugged in. It was actually pretty difficult to get the clip seated. I ended up using a pair of needle nose pliers to engage the plug's retaining clips onto itself. Back here at the alternator, again, this clip was not seated into the alternator. I just had to give it a firm push until I heard the clip engage. As you can see, this unit was not shipped with counterweights, which was pretty disappointing. I've heard a rumor the predecessor to this is the IRC20, and it had counterweights. The SDLE20 does not. Let's hope they're actually improving the quality as they're made and don't just get more and more cheap until these machines are practically useless. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll see you next time.